welcome to this session on gentrification and poverty in communities of color. I'm excited to have this conversation as we know that both of these issues have great influence on our communities of need, and being in child welfare, it also impacts disproportionality of our families that are in our system. So this is a really important conversation. We have two very exciting presenters that will be joining us, and Elizabeth will formally introduce them in a bit. But Mr. Forrest Williams and Ms. Tamika Ellsworth will be providing their perspectives on this subject. I'm so sorry. Just when I need them to cooperate, they don't. My name is Rocio Abundis. I'm with the Department of Family and Children's Services, and I oversee the Prevention Bureau, and we are hosting this session tonight. I wanted to start off with a moment of silence for Mr. John Lewis. As we all know, he has been a huge contributor to social justice. He was part of the 1965 march in Selma, Alabama, and he was one of those that was brutally beaten by police. He's been an incredible figure of civil rights movement and a longtime U.S. congressman who's been consistent in the fight for social justice. We also want to remember many of those that have unexpectedly lost their lives, but have still been have played a significant role in our fight for social justice. Their lost lives have inspired us and motivated us to step up. So please join me in a moment of silence for all of the individuals that are also lightly listed behind these photos as well. Okay, let's keep them in our hearts and keep their spirit going with our continued fight and our quest for education and understanding. I'm going to pass the baton to one of my colleagues, Elizabeth Stewart, who will be facilitating the most of the meeting today. And we will tag team the chat box and make sure that we are able to get as many questions as we can. I know that these are rich conversations to be had, so we won't be able to get every question in, but we'll do our absolute best. This session is being recorded and will be made available to all of you as well as anybody else who wishes to hear it. And we will take seriously the comments that will be put into the box. We will be sharing it with leadership in the Department of Family and Children's Services and certainly any other leadership as appropriate. So I'm going to pass the baton to Miss Elizabeth Stewart, and I'll be kind of on and off throughout the evening.
Thank you, Rocio. Thank you, everyone, for participating with us tonight. We're so excited to have Mr. Forrest Williams and Ms. Tamika Ellsworth with us. You will leave this meeting receiving a whole lot of wealth information. So we're very excited about that, and we thank them for their time. I just want to highlight again that we are being recorded. I want to highlight that we do have a chat box. If you have a question or comment or thought, feel free to put that into the chat box, which is on the bottom, should be on the bottom bar of your screen. If you wish to give a signal that, hey, this is a good thought, or hey, we agree with that, if you hit your reactions button, should be to your right, you can see those little signals pop up there. If you would like to raise your hand to ask a question, if you hit your participants button, you hit the participants button, and then you can do a thumb up or a handshake. Can anybody see that? You should, oh, let me do it this way. Sorry, you should be able to, there we go. Be able to use hand signals to indicate you have a question. And that again is on your participants bar. Can you all see mine? Nope. Okay. And if you can't, if we don't see it on the screen, then you can just raise your hand if you have a question, okay? This will be an opportunity to, for Mr. Forrest Williams and Ms. Tamika Ellsworth to give us some information and some feedback. We don't want to be real rigid, but we want to stay with the flow. So be flexible. Rocio may jump in and say, hey, there's a question here, or somebody else may indicate that they have a question and we may pop it in. But for the most part, if you could put your questions in the chat box, at the end we'll have a question and answer time. Okay. All right. How we wish to proceed in our meeting tonight, we want to take space, make space. In other words, we want to give people opportunity to listen and hear and really think about some of the underlying issues relating to racism and what we're dealing with right now. We want to maintain a brave space, and that we want to make sure that people feel safe expressing their thoughts and their opinions during our time. Again, applaud and give thumbs up when you support a comment. We like to have one conversation at a time. So while Tamika or Mr. Forrest are speaking, if you could have yourself on mute, that would be great. When you are speaking or if you are presenting a question, you can take yourself off of mute. That would be great. Again, use the chat box, and remember the focus is about empowerment. Okay, I think at this point, I'm going to take a minute and introduce Mr. Forrest Williams and Tamika. And I'm just going to read over their bio real quick. And I'm going to start with Mr. Forrest Williams. Mr. Forrest Williams is a resident of San Jose for 48 years, living in the Blossom Valley in the Oak Grove School District and Eastside Union High School District within Santa Clara Valley, Water District 1. Currently, he's a member of the Oak Grove School District Bond Oversight Committee, a Santa Clara County Commissioner, a board member of the Santa Clara Valley Science and Engineering Fair Association, and is a board member of the Black Infant Health Advisory Board. He was elected to the San Jose City Council in November 2000, re-elected in 2004, and completed his term in 2008 due to the term limits. He represents more than 92,000 residents of the Santa Teresa, Edenville, Coyote Valley area of South San Jose. Prior to City Council, serving on the City Council, he served 3 terms as a trustee of the Oak Grove School District and served as a City of San Jose Planning Commissioner for 8 years, Vice President of the Boys and Girls Club of Silicon Valley, Board Member of the South Valley Family YMCA, Treasurer of Santa Clara County Democratic Central Committee, Treasurer of South County Democratic Club, and a member of Oak Grove School District's Oversight Committee. He was employed by IBM for over 35 years as a development engineer, senior program manager, and storage consultant for IBM in Japan. Forrest and his wife, Dorothy, are retired. They have been happily married for over 55 years. Congratulations. They have 2 adult children, 3 grandchildren, 1 at Pepperdine, 1 at UCLA, and 1 a junior in high school. That is Mr. Forrest Williams. Then we have Mrs. Tamika Ellsworth. And I just want to say it has been an honor and a pleasure to get to know both of these folks. Tamika, when we first met, we hit it off right away. And I was really impressed with her charisma and her love for what she does. It's not a job for her. She loves helping people understand financial education. And part of her bio, she, as seen on season 6 of the TV show, The American Dream. Tamika's passion for real estate echoes her love for a great success story. Tamika's award-winning 16-year career in real estate started when she became a Union 405 carpenter in San Jose, California. From building churches, orphanages, and homes for the homeless in Tijuana, Mexico, to volunteering with the Peninsula Habitat for Humanity, she quickly understood that home ownership is an essential tool for generational wealth building. So please welcome both of our speakers. And I'm excited. I'm just excited about us moving forward here. So Rocio, let's go to that slide on gentrification. We're going to kick it off with Mr. Forrest Williams.
And actually, before we do that, can I invite people to turn their videos on so that the speakers can see who they're talking to? and feel that there is a connection to the people that are on the other end. So I invite you to please turn on your video. Thank you.
All right. So Mr. Forrest Williams, I'm going to let you go ahead and kick us off. This is the slide that you wanted us to put up here. So
Yeah. Yes, that's the slide. I want to say hello, everybody. And I hope that we have an opportunity to share something with you that's going to improve your life, give you a different perspective of life, and also allow you to make a monumental decision about wealth. As we know, the dream of America is, I want to own a home. And the reason that is that in there lies wealth and comfort and security. And in America, it has been denied. Many of our African-American community and people of color have been denied that opportunity. To start with, let's talk about gentrification. It's the process of repairing and rebuilding homes and businesses in a deteriorating area, such as an urban neighborhood, accompanied by an influx of middle class or affluent people, and that often causes displacement of usually poor a resident that's within the facility. In that are many factors governing the deteriorating neighborhood. Cities don't maintain them. They don't have the services to them. The income of individuals are not adequate enough to pay for upkeeping the neighborhood. There's slum landlords who prey on those that are in need of residence or need housing. So there are many factors involved with gentrification. And cities use it as a means to bring revenue into the city. Investors, like developers, use it as a means to make profit. And the individuals who are impacted the most are those individuals who live in those deteriorating residences. They have a family in that community, but the idea of using them as a means to make profit off, rather than have them use that same gentrification to improve their lives. So we'll talk about some of that. But let's look at some of the things that, let's look at some of the facilities that accommodate gentrification. Could you put the slide on the video quickly? I just want to show you the idea of gentrification. Rather than just to talk about it, it may give you a better flavor of what gentrification is.
give us just a sec. We're going to pull it up just one sec here.
I think the idea is that a picture will give you 1,000 views of what is going on. I could talk all day about the definition, but to get you to see exactly what it is, it gives you a better feel. Now, as I was growing up, I didn't know about the term gentrification. What I knew about was urban development. And we saw a lot of that in the cities, the large cities like New York and Chicago and those areas. Here's an example of what gentrification is. This is the after picture. That is the before picture on the left. You see the deteriorating neighborhood, and they come in and make it a better neighborhood. And what they do is raise the prices on the rent. And what it does also is forces those individuals who were living in the facility to have to look for other housing. And chances are the housing will cost more, or they will move farther and further away from the city. So it has an impact on individuals who live in the complex or in the facility or in the neighborhood. The whole idea is for profit. Profit is the motive for gentrification. Now, gentrification didn't start yesterday. And our federal government, as well as our local government, as well as developers, have used that vehicle to control and prevent African Americans and people of color from sharing in the wealth of America. So I will let Tamika chime in now and talk to you about how the government and how the manipulation of property and individuals, how it impacted us and how it was legitimately done and intentionally done in order to prevent us from sharing into the wealth of this great country. Tamika?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Forrest. Hello, everyone. I'm Tamika Ellsworth here, and that is a great introduction as to what gentrification is. And what I'm here to shed a little light on, especially being, I guess, the person that takes individuals from the idea that home ownership is not a possibility and actually getting them into homes. I get to see the whole process happening, whether it be happening in neighborhoods that get gentrified, or it happens in neighborhoods where I have families that finally say, you know what, I don't want to rent anymore. I want to purchase and I want to own a home. And so I get the unique opportunity to walk people through those areas of life. And I'm actually from San Jose. So I'm from San Jose. I've been here for a while, went to Independence. Actually, Vincy Park, Piedmont Middle, Independence. So I'm a San Jose native. My parents still live here in San Jose. Husband and I have 2 kids. We actually purchased right around the corner, literally a 2-minute walk from my parents in San Jose. And so that's a whole story in and of itself. But I want to start out first, yes, there are things that the government has done, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I think the biggest thing when it comes to home ownership and getting out of a cycle of, and there's so many different ways that you can talk about and approach that idea of poverty and gentrification and redlining and that effects. But my whole thing is the mentality. When I see that hope is lost, our hope is non-existent, it's really hard to convince someone that you can actually achieve home ownership, right? And when I think, when a family, sees a perpetual cycle of one thing, they don't think that there's any way else that they could get out of the cycle. And so I'm thankful that, topics like this come up and you get to talk about things and you get to actually shed a little bit of light. I do believe that when we talk about knowing your history, knowing the history of gentrification, knowing the history of actually redlining in particular areas and communities, and even in Santa Clara County, the government literally designed programs in order to separate people. Okay, and it actually started a little bit before, but I'll tell you about the history of redlining. So hopefully you got your pen and your paper, but there I have a lot of great resources too online with it. I'll try to keep it in a nutshell. But in 1933, but the federal government, they actually began a program specifically designed to increase and segregate America's housing stock. And a really good book on this, you might want to write this down, Richard Rothstein. He wrote a book called The Color of Law. Excellent book when it comes to how the US government actually segregated America. Okay, so during this time in 1933, there was a housing program that began in the New Deal, and it was a state-sponsored system of segregation, no joke. And the government's effort, it was designed to provide housing to white, middle-class, lower middle-class families. And African Americans and other people of color, they were left out of those communities, and they were pushed instead into urban housing projects. And so, as you see, it starts even early on, and we wonder why things are, kind of taking shape right now. We wonder why, we're having problems in understanding that, hey, that stuff happened a long time ago. It doesn't have an effect on us, but actually it does. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But specifically, the Federal Housing Administration, I don't know if you guys heard of the FHA. They have FHA loans now, Federal Housing Authority loans. And so they had these particular, loans, and it was established in about 1934, so like a year later. And ultimately what it did is they furthered the segregation efforts by refusing to insure mortgages in and near African-American neighborhoods and communities. And it was a policy known as redlining. You've probably heard that term before, but it is actually how it sounds, redlining. And at the time, FHA, which is interesting now because it now serves those of color and moderate to low income families, but the FHA, they subsidized builders who were mass producing entire subdivisions specifically just for whites. However, the requirement that the FHA gave them in order to build these subdivisions was that none of the homes could be sold to African Americans, really. And, although it's, decades old, housing policies, but they had a lasting effect on, society. Obviously, in certain areas, as you see, you wonder, like, well, why is, a particular area, housed a particular way, or why, are certain areas absent of other places or more segregated than others? Hence, from our government, they literally said that the justification of having African Americans buying homes in these areas, they would bring down the property values, and they didn't want to insure these areas because, again, anyone else bringing down property values, okay, that was one thing, but if you had if you were Black coming into these areas, it was more of a risk. Hence the reason why, when you look at the breakup of redlining, even in Santa Clara County, they had it. They gave different kind of like ratings in certain areas. There was like, green, blue, red, A areas in green were considered hot spots, and there were good areas for mortgage lenders to lend on. C areas, there were still good, there were yellow areas, all of that stuff, but it was all broken up into different areas, even in Santa Clara County, all over the world. And you had investment companies or federal financial companies that actually took part of this, and they said, you know what, federal government, believes it, well, then we're going to do it too. So you have finance companies that actually invest, or that actually took these practices and they put it into their kind of investment portfolios, right? And they were called, the acronym was HOLC, and they would actually have these maps. So just like the government had maps of redlining, they had maps of redlining of areas and categories that they would actually lend on or not lend on. And it's interesting that even though it's, you fast forward and you have federal, fair housing laws that had established in 1968 or so. And even though it was established then, you still had other lending processes that happened later on that still limited people of color in these areas. And, we see the effects of that today, even now when people go for different loans. And, believe it or not, there were Supreme Court rulings, and I think even as recent as like 2015, there was recent rulings that, Supreme Court rulings, as a matter of fact, that actually sided with civil rights advocates in fair housing cases. Now, granted, this was over in Texas, that, it was a decision where they said, hey, things like redlining actually had an effect on, us today. How did it have an effect? Well, when you have a racial segregation of a major area, and you look to see kind of the effects that it's had on generational wealth, like, this particular family was able to sell their home, get their homes cheap, and sell for many, more expensive, tax laws, tax credits, even for low income housing areas. The Supreme Court, it was brought to the Supreme Court, and it was a ruling of 5-4 for civil rights advocates that, despite it was even a 45-year-old law, the Dallas nonprofit group and the Texas authorities, they were able to advocate and challenge the belief that, hey, racial bias still happens. And because of, tax credits for low income housing, this is not okay. And they called it something of the effect of disparate impact. And that was a theory that used statistics and other evidence to demonstrate that these housing practices and lending practices, it actually hurt minorities. And even though it wasn't intentional, it was really slight. And they actually won. And it was a decision that was made in, again, this is 2015. So think about it. You know, fair housing laws had changed supposedly since 1968. However, it still had the effect up into 2015, and probably even more now of other cases. But this was a big one that it went to the Supreme Court, and it actually got ruled that yes, racial segregation and the segregation of the things that happened, whether it be 45 years later or such, is still happening and practicing today. Yeah. Not only in financial aspects, but it also is on retail. You know, you look and see different communities and you wonder, well, there's certain retail companies that are in or the other areas, but they're not in other, you know, they're not in other communities. Why is that? Well, it's kind of the same type of thing, but again, it's a lot subtle where, well, we don't consider that an area that is conducive to, you know, our retail. So you see that actually happening still, even to this day in communities, and it does have an effect. And I think that the more you understand and kind of realize that the system and how it was set up is not a system that, it's a slow change.
Right.
And I guess when you look at it, if it takes a person with you know, a view on how they view life and how they view people, whether it be racism and such, if you take a person's mindset, and it takes a while for them to kind of change. Well, think about a process that took over decades in order to happen, that was set up and designed for separation. And think about how long that process is going to take for that system to overturn itself and for you to start to see change.
Yeah. Well, I like to chime in here and say that all of this was done deliberately as a form of racism, and this racism has plagued us from generation, for many 400 years or more of this effort have plagued us, and we have not been able to overcome the Reconstruction area where the Jim Crow laws was implemented, and they intentionally segregated us out because they wanted to maintain that superiority or white supremacy. And it was in business as well. So in business, there is this view that you make a profit, and the whole intention was to make a profit. So how could we best, if we keep the people of color at a lower socioeconomic level, and then we can control when things are built, where they are built, the government can in fact enrich the majority white population with the opportunities, and we don't get any. We don't get any. Our salary, we get the lowest salary. The white salary is almost double what the African-American salary is. And out of that, we've got health care, we've got education, we've got food, medicine, upkeep, car, all of those factors we have to do, and less money, so you don't have it to invest. You don't have it to go out and purchase a lot of these opportunities when they're available to us. But we're going to have to sacrifice, if we want to get out of this thing, we're going to have to be clever, more clever than those that tend to deny us opportunity. Now, when I grew up, my wealth that my mother and father left me was education.
Right.
That's all that they left with me, and to apply that and encourage me to assess, to be able to evaluate the situation and then participate in it in a way that is going to be to your advantage. Understand the system, as we say, understand what they're doing, and then look at how can you benefit from what they're doing. not to just accept it and say, well, it's an impossibility because of the difficulties we were faced in the past. So I'm encouraging all of you to rethink, look at the situation, understand how, if I am in the neighborhood and they're going to, it's a gentrified neighborhood, and they're going to refurbish that neighborhood, then why don't I stay and refurbish in that neighborhood as well? And then take on the opportunity and growth that the gentrification is going to bring to that neighborhood. Then you can share wealth to the next generation. So those are things that I want everyone to understand, and Tamika gave a good presentation on. It was intentional. It was not happenstance. It was ordered. Our tax dollars that we paid was used to disenfranchise people of African American and people of color. So we need to really need to think about it and look at it, analyze it, see it. Look at your city general plan. Look at the resources that are available to you about. Go to the city council meeting. I was a planning commissioner, so I had a chance to look at all of that stuff to try to make sure to balance it out that we had opportunity as well as others. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you might have.
You know, Forrest, you bring up a really great point too, being at the table. A lot of times it's like, well, how do I even combat, you know, everything that has happened, especially in the housing structure. And I can say this, a lot of the people that I help, and remember I talked about hope before, but a lot of the people that I help are first generation homeowners. And I specifically like doing that. I specifically like helping first time home buyers. And to be able to see the change, and it started at a different point. You know when you do something in life and you're like, wow, this is kind of this does something to me, in order to kind of see it and then it unfolds in your life. Well, being able to see that happen in Tijuana when I was there building a home, like for a family, literally building, and you know they would be in a taco truck or they would be waiting for us to come to build a house, and to see the effects of just a house, and it wasn't necessarily big, but just the effects of having home ownership, it changed the whole dynamic of the whole family, right? And when I see, there's a lot of resources that people have no clue that are out there. And when I see things when it talks about the racial wealth gap, and it's true, and it's real. I believe in 2019, the average wealth of Black families was less than 10% compared to the average white family. And it's the truth. And this was a study done in 2019. But how does it change? How do you change it? What do you do in order to make changes? And systemic racism, although I think you may have touched on that, Forrest, it's a true thing. Gentrification, redlining, all of the stuff that you don't really see. Hey, everything that went away, in the 60s and 70s. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It doesn't make a difference right now, right? That's what most people would say. But in all actuality, still the numbers are still skewed. Right. And so, when you have such a different wealth gap, and a head start on areas, I don't care what you say, it is a difference. And just like Forrest, my parents, they didn't leave me like this whole trust fund of a fund, but one of the things that they did leave me with, and even my husband as well, was the idea of home ownership. And I saw my parents go from a condo to a smaller home to the home that there are now. As being African American parents, still together too, which was an anomaly in and of itself. And to be able to see that structure in my life, and then to compare that to someone that didn't have that, I see how important it is. And that's far greater, I think, than even money. To be able to see that example, right? But I also see too that the different things that they have, kind of the inequalities when it talks about different applicants, right? We can even talk about rental applicants, discrimination wise. I think it's most important that you understand when discrimination, when things are happening in even the rental component, whether it be, you know, the purchasing or even the rental component, to understand what it is, and to understand too that you don't have to let it slide. And then the more people actually say things, the more people stop doing those type of things when they're called out on it. And I think it's very important to understand what is, for instance, what's racial discrimination? What does that look like? You know, I mean, it's as subtle, and we don't have to go into complete detail, but it's as subtle as you going on an application and then finally saying that, oh, well, we don't have any more application room available, or saying something to the effect of, oh, you have children, we can't, you know, you can't rent here, or there's a problem. There's little subtle things that you got to pick up on, and educating yourself on how to make sure that when people are putting these practices into place, whether it's subtle or not, you can call it out and say, no, that isn't right. And I'm not going to stand for it, because if people keep thinking that they can do it and get away with it, well, they're going to keep doing it.
Right.
You know, and I think the more we empower ourselves, and the more that, for instance, the sites that, well, which is interesting, the FHA, which again was the perpetrator of division and segregation, now has flipped and changed. So when you go to, like, for instance, the HUD.gov website, and when you look to see what actual housing discrimination is, race, color, creed, you know, even marital status, children, you know, there are so many ways in which I think when you educate yourself on knowing what power that you actually do have, I think, again, those are the things that hope ends up arising, especially when you don't think there's just no way to get out of it.
Right. Well, one thing there's one resource that is available to you, and you should use it at every opportunity that you get. If you feel you're being discriminated against, go to City Hall. They have an open forum, and you can tell the council and the mayor that you're being discriminated against, and you can have an action. They will look into it and get back to you, so that you can have, whether the people are correct in their summation of why they're not going to loan to you or not going to rent to you. You have your government behind you, and use them for that benefit. And I think that the more we know, the more we have at our hands, we can combat this idea of racism. It's not going to just automatic. There's no love for us. You can see what has happened to us over the years. So we must be clever. We must outthink those individuals that will do us harm, and be equipped with the tools necessary. And the more we learn, the more knowledge we have, is the better off we'll be. And my wife and I, when our kids finished college, we told them, don't buy anything else but a house. That's the first thing you buy. Don't go buy a car. Don't buy electronic equipment, you know, the best speakers in the house and all that stuff. You want something that's going to give you a return on your investment. If you buy a car, the depreciation is significant when you just roll off the yard. You may have a nice car, but over time, what is the value? What is the value over time? So we want them to understand, and if we teach our children and educate them and be a role model for them, they will actually benefit. So the kids do. They have homes, and they tell me now and my wife, oh, what a great investment we made. And we thought it through and all that. But that's good to share those thoughts with them, to have them understand how they can, I say, outwit the system, even though it tries desperately to keep you down. Get the education and understanding to overcome the situation. And education is very, very important to do that.
So, Mr. Williams, I have a question, or maybe it's a comment, I'm not sure, but a lot of this resonates to me. My first home I purchased in East Berkeley
Mhm.
back in the 90s. We loved Berkeley and wanted to raise our family there. Houses were very affordable back then. And now I go back and I'm absolutely stunned at how beautiful East Berkeley looks.
Mhm.
And I worry about, okay, where do all the people that were like me, young and starting, where do they go? Because they can't afford East Berkeley now. But my question to you is, part of what drove us out was the crime in the area. So East Berkeley back then was not a very good neighborhood. And, you know, I wanted to raise my family there. So I was torn between loving Berkeley and the community and all that it represented, and hating the crime and saying, I can't raise my children in this environment. So I was very young then. So a lot of what you're saying now, I would do now at this age, but back then I didn't know enough as to how to lobby for myself, how to approach, you know, decision makers. So I don't really know if it's a question or a statement, but what, you know, what can people like myself back then do
Well,
in situations like that?
like this is what you would have to exactly like the general plan. I always say, if you're going to buy a house, if you're considering real estate or something, go down to City Hall and look at the general plan. It's usually 10 years or thereabouts what their plans are for the area, and whether it's going to redevelop it to homes or businesses or whatever. So that general plan is available to you. And had you gone to City Hall and complained about the situation, about the crime, et cetera, and just kept a group, it could have been a neighborhood complaint or whatever, then they would have to look at the plan to see how they would remedy the situation that you were in. And I think that's been the thing in the past. They had not put a plan in place to take care of the crime in the area at the time. Now they have gentrified the area, and the city has invested through developers in that area to develop the city. And now those individuals cannot afford, the ones that were there can't afford to live there anymore. So you sort of develop the crime out of the area. And that's the situation. And a lot of people weren't, I know when you're young and starting, you know, you just feel that the country is ideal, that democracy flourishes, fair, everybody is equitable. You know, if I want A, B, C, D, I can just go get it. But you can't, it just isn't. You just have to face it and figure out how best to approach the problem. And I have found out that the best thing that an individual or a neighborhood can do is they have a council member, they have a mayor, they have an open forum. You can get up at any time and say anything that you want to say, any complaint that you have to complain about, and do it at the council. Now, city council members don't really like that. They want to be, support the community. So if you had at the time knew your council member and excuse me, and went to them and say, hey, look, we can't have this. We're gonna, if you can't do something about it, we're going to the city hall. And we protest, and we get the Berkeleyites, the people from the University of California, Berkeley. Hey, let's go down. I'm having this problem, and push on it to get that done. And that's what we're going to have to do. Learn more about how the government operates, how they give contracts to developers, and what portion of the revised, remodel, or gentrified property they're going to allow from a perspective of income, what they're going to charge. Are there so many low-income units, affordable units, or what? Help me understand how you're going to, if you're going to gentrify, how are you going to accommodate those people that are already there, they want to live, and how are you going to benefit them as well? So all of those policies are before the board, before the council and the planning commission. You can go at that time too. But had you done that, I think the outcome would have been they would have done something about it. Not that it would have been everything, but it would have been on the record that you were there and you complain about that, and they have to get an answer back to you.
It's good. It's good. Tamika.
You know, I agree, like being vocal in the community. I also think too that a lot of these things happen on purpose. There's a big thing with displacement in areas. Specifically, I remember in West Oakland, for instance, I remember, going there and listing homes, and then all of a sudden there's just a landscape changing right before your eyes. They say that displacement is actually an effect of, like, for instance, poverty in areas. But I really do think that it does help worsen neighborhoods and intensifies it. And I think it does that stuff on purpose, not dealing with crime and people having to move out because they know what's going to happen later on. We got to get these people moved out so that we can change it, because the planning, remember, they plan these things 10 years in advance, 20 years in advance. So they know what's going on. And again, that's the truth. Wherever you're at now, even your parents, and they're thinking about, well, I'm just going to probably move and sell the house. Look at those plans and see what's about to happen in those neighborhoods. And you'd be surprised that if you just hold on, just hold on, you might see a dramatic increase, especially as far as the value, even in the property is concerned. Sometimes it has to get worse before it gets better. Hence, areas that I frequent in Alameda County, that it's a fringe area where it's a changing area, and it's not as expensive as the certain areas, but you can still get the same zip code, and you can still get the same schools. And if you can hold on for, with the property for as long as you can, you'll start to see a change happen. And then guess what? Now the change in the quote gentrification has now shifted to where you're at because you were able to hold on to that property. I have a lot of people looking for properties in that fringe area. But when you talk about displacement, though, I think that's huge. I think that affects pretty much everything across the board when it comes to, that's forced moving. It's eviction from a poor landlord. It's crime, areas and people not doing anything with it as far as your city council. Extreme rent increases. Displacement, what happens? You usually end up moving or living in shelters, or especially if it's a family dynamic, kids suffer with that, especially with their, education, mental health. Guy, you mentioned it, and I'm sure you guys know this as far as the mental health factor, but I really do think that situation, or those situations of displacement, really are perpetuated by the powers that be, because they don't want to change the areas, because they know that once they can move you out, number one, you don't have the, just like how Forrest talked about, you don't have the voice anymore, right? To come together as a community and talk about these certain things in order to get things changed. Why? Because everyone says, nope, I don't want to be here, and you move out. So therefore you don't have the same community. It's a different neighborhood effect. Studies show too, like there's a cycle, that happens. When you move out of the area, you get displaced, you usually go to an area, families do, that end up being a worse area than was before. So that perpetuates the whole cycle of poverty happening over and over again. I think it's so unfortunate, and it really shouldn't be this way. And I see this I just out and about and in real estate. It should not be that your home values determine what your schools get. It shouldn't be that way. It should not be that way. Everyone should have the same access to education, schools, resources, but it's not that way. Yeah. And, until we look at those type of situations where, why is it? Why does the property taxes in a particular area, knowing darn well that those properties are millions of dollars less than others? What do you expect that it's going to happen to the education system? What do you expect that's going to happen to the community involvement in environments? What do you expect that's going to happen? Oh, but yet you're going to wait until it gets that bad and then gentrify and come and change it. It's not okay. It's so not okay.
Yeah.
But again, displacement in those areas is a huge thing. I think I was talking with a friend of mine, and your zip code and growing up is actually probably more important than your genetic code in determining your life expectancy in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. Seriously, where you grew up, not necessarily even your family, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that it's true that in communities that have problems and they're not coming together and they are dispersing, they are being dispersed out, that it's less political power. As Forrest talked about, like in those areas coming together and talking and banding together and coming to your city council talking about things. It's true, and they know this, that it's less political power. You can't come together for a voice and actually talk about the things that you need. Like, for instance, if a Facebook comes down the area, you actually banding together and saying, hey, Facebook, we see that you're here and you see that you're changing things. And I know this has happened in the Belhaven area of Menlo Park. I know this firsthand. But the community coming together and saying, no, small businesses, we have elderly, what are you going to do in order to help make sure that the people that are here are not going to be pushed out? And stand together with it, and you have power in doing those things and making those changes. But a lot of times we don't even know we have power like that in communities.
That's go ahead, Forrest.
I have one other statement to make. What the government does is have contracts with developers. The developers come into the city and make a request for a zoning change or so many units. And so we tried to develop a plan by which, okay, we will allow you to develop, but you have to develop X number of affordable units as a part of the overall. But see, the hooker on that is they don't have to do that. They don't have to. It's if, you can make a gesture, the developer can make a gesture toward the city to accommodate them sufficiently enough to get the development. Mm. So being a part of all that and understanding what the needs are, the developer might not provide what the adequate needs, or he could provide more, but this is an appeasement number to allow them to get the development. Mm. And so the voice, as you've seen the work that the community has done with Google coming to San Jose, in terms of bringing all those jobs in, and then all these outside people that are getting those jobs are the middle class and affluent people. They can afford to live. The people that are there can't afford it, can't afford to live in San Jose, even though the economic development say, well, we need the economic development for the city of San Jose. So the people are saying, well, if you're going to bring all these jobs and you're going to bring all these people and you pay them all this money, then what about the people that are here that can't afford it? You've got to make accommodation for them. So it's another form of gentrification where you displacing people. And the idea is that they do it deliberately. They don't, like, for instance, and Rocio. In terms of her case, they let the crime be what it is in order that they would move. And that way, they're moving out. Well, the property is available, right? So you get enough people to move, and then you've got enough area that you can gentrify. So it's all in the plan. It's a plan, and we just have to disrupt those plans in order that we get what it is that we need, and don't let them continually do what they've done in the past. We just got to stay on it, and I encourage you to just go to a city hall meeting. That's your local representative. Know your council member. Complain to them. That's what they're there for, to represent you. And if there's a question about anything, if your door isn't closing correctly, hey, council member, my door isn't closing correctly. you know, what are you guys going to do about it? The place is run down. You know, we pay taxes. You know, sign up for census. We are on the census count. We should get resources as well. So where is it? Where is the money going? I mean, all I'm saying is get involved to make a change. And getting involved, making the change will help you in terms of your growth and your development, and learn more about how you can take the system and make it work for you. Whereas in the past, the system has just worked on us and we didn't have all of the data that says, well, look, why is this? Why things don't look right? And they are not right. So the more we know, the more we understand, the better position we'll be in to help us build that generational wealth. To just sit down sometime and just talk to your children and just talk to your relatives and just say, look, this is the way it is. Now let's find a way to be creative and get out of this thing. And so I leave that as an encouragement. And I have, life has been exciting for me in terms of learning the Planning Commission, the zoning and economic development and what people do in order not to have to really change. But you got to make them change. You got to be there. And so I encourage that. Thank you.
Thank you. I think a couple of things that you said. One was that we got to get clever and outthink, and you talked about the zip codes. So I want to tag into that a little bit. Teresa Perez, did I say your name correctly, Teresa?
Yes.
Yeah, Teresa Perez had a question. Rocio had a question, that I wanted to ask a couple questions regarding the clever outthinking and the zip codes. Teresa.
Yeah, so I think with the more of the statement of what Forrest was saying, getting people out there, getting to the city council. You know, I was involved in San Jose City. There's a lot going on at the Board of Supervisor meetings, the city council meetings, you have the VTA meetings. I mean, you could drive around all over town being part of meetings, and it can get very tiresome because sometimes a lot of it is information. Some of it you can give your public comment, but educating people to let them know, yes, this is something that you have a right to as a, you know, to be able to speak your mind. When we watch for housing, homeless projects to go up into certain areas, you always have those vocal areas such as Willow Glen, you know, the more prominent areas that will gather their people together and go to those city council meetings and say, hey, we don't want this in our neighborhood. Rightfully so, you have that voice as a homeowner to do that. But a lot of times in the other areas, we have problems with a language barrier. You know, you have the generational families. So, you know, which one of us out of the 12 that might be in that household that are going to go take care of this and speak our minds, you start to lose that that buildup of community that come together, because we are of a diverse community sometimes. And so we don't band together as well. But educating people to let them know, you know, now I think right now is the perfect time. I've attended I live in Gilroy, and I've attended a lot of city council meetings purely for the fact that I want the information firsthand. You know, me going to my union meetings as a county employee, going to the directors meetings, I want to hear it first so I can digest that information and understand it and share it with others. But another thing I do is bring a friend, take someone with you. You know, I've got a few people join in this meeting just for the pure fact of sharing the knowledge and information. And that's how we spread it out to each other. But if we don't pick up a hand, I mean, right now is the Zoom meetings for City Online. It's a great avenue to just join into a city council meeting and be live and hear it and give your voice. Otherwise, like you're saying, if we start to move and go out to, you know, you hear everybody say, you know, forget California, I'm leaving. California is wonderful. It's a great place to stay. You have that voice and opinion. You have great weather. You know, you have this culture of diversity, but people aren't willing to put in that effort. Everything wants, you know, instant gratification. And until you can change that, we have to educate each other and actually give, you know, full resources, not a Facebook post and, you know, a lot of these other self-gratifications that happen so instantly. And the other mindset I see that we have to fight with, not only at your city council level, because they know everything, we've presented things and they have that upper hand because they have a full crew there that's paid to take care of their business. Meanwhile, you're doing the groundwork on top of your job, on top of your kids, on top of everything else you're doing. It can get tiresome and you start to lose your volunteers that are helping you. But the other thing to change is that change in mentality from people that say, I don't want that in my neighborhood. You know, we worked hard for this. I don't want people to come there. And kind of like today with what was said online, you know, with Trump trying to change some of the Fair Housing Acts, with that comes that rhetoric of, oh, not in my neighborhood. And you're already deteriorated people into saying low income means crime rates. That's what it equates to, when that's not true. Low income does mean seniors, the disabled, domestic violence fleers, and the programs that I work with that help place people into housing and affordable low income housing, and giving those people and their children that upper hand to say, to feel comfortable where they live. And all of a sudden you see that now you've changed that pattern and behavior that they may haven't been through for so many generations. Now they realize that they have an opportunity just because they're not being suppressed consistently, and they're living amongst other people that can help bring them up also just by their peer environment. So you definitely, I agree with you, Forrest, about taking on, it takes a lot of work. It can be tiresome. It can be deteriorating sometimes, but it's more deteriorating not knowing the information and letting to know that there is a city council meeting that went by and maybe one of your items that you feel hot about, you just passed by, happened by not being there, and educating others. So education is a big part, and holding people accountable at your city council and your planning commissions is a huge part of that.
Thank you, Teresa. That's good feedback. I think Rocio had, oh, Tamika, did you want to chime in on a feedback to her? And then we'll go to you, Rocio.
Yeah, especially when it comes to the education component to it. So yes, you have your city level coming together and banding together, but you also have the resources that are right at the tip of your fingertips. And when I touched on it before, HUD.gov, you have access to affordable housing at your fingertips. And a lot of people don't even know this, that you have homes that go into foreclosure, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac products, and these homes are at a fraction of the price that you would normally get them at. They specifically are designed for like FHA loans, those that are low to moderate income, maybe those that don't have 20% down, those that don't have cash in order to buy a home, and not for investors, but specifically for first-time home buyers. The programs, it's educating yourself on knowing that you have access to those. There are not as many now, but there probably will be, unfortunately, because of due to what we're going through right now. It's probably going to be a lot more foreclosures. That being said, door opening up for more people to be able to capitalize on these particular properties that are foreclosed homes. That's one. Number two, you have a lot of resources, even with the city of Santa Clara County, Alameda County, anywhere, any county that you have programs for down payment assistance programs in order to get into homes. Even so much so as being, good neighbor next door. Talking about teachers, first responders, you can actually get into properties on HUD properties for half of what the actual price is. There are resources out there, but again, just like everything else, a lot of people want I want it now, I want it quick. But if you take the time to actually look into research, hopefully having the right access to things, but if you take the time to actually look and research, you'd be surprised. Thinking about outside the box on how to make this thing work for you, since the system is designed the way that it is, they actually have resources that you can utilize. We're talking about like $1 homes. I'm talking about situations where you can get into a house and they're going to give you up to $150,000 that you don't have to pay back unless staying in the house for 10 years. I'm talking about situations where you can come in with 3.5% or 2% down, if that, in order to get into a home, and it doesn't cost you. Those are the resources that I'm talking about in order to actually make home ownership and actually wealth and through homeownership an actual possibility. But if you don't even think that's a possibility, you're fighting up here, but it's like, no, dig a little deeper, because it takes some time, right? Dig a little deeper and you'll see that there's actual resources right there. It may take a little longer. Yeah, there may be a little bit of waiting list, but Forrest had talked about too, below market rate homes, they're there. I had clients get into them, and it's a lot of, it takes a lot of paperwork. It takes a lot of people digging into your personal private life, but they're there. Got into a home. This is in Concord, actually. They have them over here in Morgan Hill and Santa Clara County as well. but got into a below market rate home. Specifically, these homes are designed, maybe in the $800,000, $700,000. They got into the home for $418,000, and with an FHA loan, so 3.5%. They were able to get into an actual three bedroom, 2.5 bath, 1,700 square foot home. Why? Because they did the paperwork and they did the work, and they had patience in order to do it. So that being said, when you talk about the education on things, you got to know that you have, programs. You have everything at the tip of your fingers. But it's not fast. It's not easy. But you have access to it.
That's good feedback. I think, again, I go back to what you both were talking about in terms of, well, the statement of clever and outthink. A lot of times, you think about Santa Clara County, we're about 2.5%. Blacks in Santa Clara County, 2.5%. When we were growing up here, it was a lot more, right? It was a lot more.
Even
so
my block was a lot more. Shoot.
Yeah.
My parents probably the only, I remember maybe about 5 families of color. They're probably the only probably 2 left. Yeah, my parents, it was the same. So what we're seeing today is that we are really, we're turning over all these rocks, and we're saying, hey, there's redlining here. We're talking about zip codes. We know that in the 95122, certain zip codes were really targeted even regarding COVID-19. Yeah.
Right? We're talking about disproportionality overall, right? But in real estate and every dynamic, child welfare, incarceration, poverty and wealth, education, the numbers are still disproportionate. So that tells us that, again, I love what we're saying, is that we've got to get to City Hall and get our voices heard. And number 2, a lot of us, and those of us that are really working and supporting our child welfare families, or therapists, or doing any work with families, this is really key information, because we want to take this information and we want to empower parents, empower families to get down to City Hall and have their voices heard. Because we do know that a lot of our disproportionality families that we're dealing with come from families in areas of poverty. We do know that. So it's important that we take this information. I think one of the questions on here had to do with, or we'll see if that was yours. How do we get a diverse voice on the boards that make those plans? And then Jones said anyone can apply to be a commissioner and sit on a board. I think it's really key that we really, and Tamika, you and I have talked about this, is the mindset and the belief system. So the redlining says this, and the law, we know that things don't change, things until it becomes policy. That's why the Voting Rights Act of 65 was so huge, right? Because it's not going to change until it becomes a policy. And even then, we had to fight to uphold that, right? So we know that part of that, the struggle is in our mindsets and our belief systems, and not just settling, but really, again, begin to be clever and outthink the opposition. Being able to utilize, and let's talk about that again. We got how many minutes? We got about 5 more minutes or so. Okay. So let's talk about this, because I think it's really, because there's folks on here from the community, there's social services staff on here, there's business owners on here. How do we really, what are like the top 2 things? One, we've talked about getting folks to City Hall, having them advocate. Teresa talked about pulling people together. What are 2 other things that we can do to really help people change their mindsets and beliefs and say, you know what, this is possible? Especially and again, I go back to our parents that we're serving in child welfare. How do we really empower them to say, hey, this is possible? Forrest?
Well, I would say that one key is to meet someone that has succeeded.
Good.
Meet someone that has had success. Understand how they did it. And then see if your situation will allow you to follow that pattern, or you have some other pattern. But understand how they did it. Even though there was difficulty, even though the system was not for them. The system was rigged against them, but they were able enough to be clever and achieve the objective of home ownership. I think that's important because that way you have a roadmap. You can say, I went through it. The other thing is, we said, join up, be at the table. Because if you're at the table, you can challenge things. If you're not at the table, you don't raise it. No one else is going to raise the issue for you. So those are the two things that I have to offer in terms of how we can really assure ourselves that whatever we're going to do is going to work. And you can share your plan with someone that has been successful.
Good.
And sharing that with them will help you. They can make you course correction, or we think you ought to maybe do A instead of doing B, do C at this particular time because of all these other things. So I think that's important.
The mentorship, just being able to help, walk hand in hand with somebody through this, because I think I'm really stuck on how do I get to change people's mindsets from what I can't do based on what society says or what this racism is saying versus what can I do, and how do that's gonna be my poster, right? Is be clever and outthink. Tamika, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I feel that the more you, and I'm sure that we do it, but more having, for instance, talks like these, having more situations where you're able to share knowledge and information, and it ties into, obviously, if I've done it here, this is how I did it, and being able to actually give that back out. I think it's so important that I deal a lot with people that just, well, I don't see people that look like me, so I'm not going to, purchase in this particular area, or I don't want to, I want to feel like I'm involved because everyone's just moving out of the area, right? But instead of that, why not, plant yourself in the area so that people see you, and then you have more people that say, well, it's not a lot, but hey, I'm gonna be involved with my community. I'm gonna be involved with it, and I'm gonna talk to people about staying. I'm gonna talk to people about the different opportunities that are here, and being able to have workshops, or being able to have even more discussions, not just on the practical, but even just the mental components on what hope and what faith is. I'm sorry, I come from a background of faith and opportunity, and hence I do faith in home buying. That's like the biggest thing. And without faith in a lot of ways, there's no hope. And so, at least for myself, I think more of that talk needs to happen with people, especially now with a lot of things that are going on. Hence, that's the reason why when I talk about home buying, I automatically marry faith with it, because it's so important. You have your practical steps, but then you also have the other part that says, you know what, no matter what, I'm still going to prevail, and I'm still going to rise. And, no matter what, although things are stacked against me, yeah, okay, the wealth gap is what it is, but I still will prevail, and I still will rise no matter what. I see people that have done it, and they've actually looked back and held out their hand in order to bring me back up. So, number one, not turning your back on, those that are trying to, I try my best to be the best advocate, or the best person, the best cheerleader in the back, like, you can do it. And I'm telling you, you can do it. If I went through having 2 short sales, and in 2 years still able to have home ownership, there's hope. Something that should have taken 7 years, 9 years. My whole testimony is that even in the midst of losing your house, even in the midst of a pandemic, even in the midst of things happening that seem so systemically wrong and happening to you, there's still faith. And you can't forget that X factor in this whole talk. You just can't. And so, definitely having more of that type of discussion, definitely having more of the discussion where it's you have your practical, but you also have, the mindset that has to change. You can get out of it, you can change, and your family can have wealth created.
That's awesome. About 4 years ago, I finally got to see a piece of property out in Tyler, Texas that my great grandfather bought. and it was actually deeded down, it stays within the family. It was quite and when my dad passed, it was deeded to my siblings and I. It was the first time I've seen it. And what was powerful was that I saw the legacy that they left. And it wasn't just the property itself. It was, there's a schoolhouse there, there's a church, there's a cemetery, there's a steward this, steward that, steward that. Very powerful to see where folks came from and who paid the price for me to be here today. And Forrest, you and I have talked about that, is the things that we pass on in our generations. What are we leaving for the generations coming behind us? And I think that's another key piece, whether that is financially, right? Whether that is education, whether that for me, in our family, there's lots of stories, amazing stories. Or when my dad passed away, a lot of us, we get our parents' items, my dad's Bible, or significant things that tell us the story of where we came from and the hope to where we can go. So I think this is really a very key, significant conversation. I want to ask if anybody else, I want to personally say hi to Don Taylor. I see he's on here. He's hiding his face, but Don Taylor, good to see you. Glad you joined us. Don, did you want to make a comment? Okay, anybody else have questions? Don Taylor.
Hey, I appreciate the shout out, and I have learned a lot this evening. So I really appreciate hearing the wisdom, and it gives me a ton to think about. And with all the families we support over at Uplift Family Services, there's a lot to do. So I really appreciate this time. Thank you all.
Thanks, Don. Anybody have any last minute questions they'd like to bring out? I also see Rhonda Butler's on here. Anybody have any last minute questions that they would like to? Okay. All right. Well, we're at 6:20. I think again, I just want to remind us, and I'm gonna let Rocio have the final word. There are resources here regarding gentrification. And these are some resources that Mr. Forrest provided for us. And everybody that's participating in this event session I will send them out on email to you, along with a copy of the video of this meeting as well. The Color of Law, Gentrification, Displacement, and the Role of Public Investment, Naked City, The Death and Life of Authentic Urban Places, The View from Here, Urban Displacement Project. All right, and then I think we have another page of resources. Yeah, and then this, thank you both for providing these. Tamika, did you want to say anything about your resources here?
Yeah, these are some of the things that I had alluded to. I mean, a lot of people know about NACA. That's a huge, housing resource that everyone should look into, not only just NACA, but HUD.org, Housing of Urban Development, really good resources. When it talks about good neighbor next door, again, that's what I talked about, whether you are a teacher, a first responder, they have actual programs that you can get into homes for 50% lower than what it already is. And so I've known people that have experienced this, not necessarily in this particular market, but it's coming back. So resource yourself. Dollar homes. It is actually a thing where if they can't sell a HUD home in 6 months, the home goes then back on the market, not to investors, but it goes back on the market so that it can generate community housing or community involvement in home ownership. And you can literally get homes for $1. Rehab loans. You can even get rehab loans for homes that you need money on and you can't fix it. Well, they have loans that you can actually get for them through a FHA loan. There's so many CalHAFA down payment assistance programs. All of those resources are something that you can look into. When it talks about I put some dates on there too. Homebuyers, Empower Homebuyers of Santa Clara County. It's something that's actually going on now, getting into a list, going there and seeing exactly what resources that you have. And there's something coming up, I think that was on the 4th or the 12th, but that's something that Santa Clara County has. So that's the thing, people are sleeping on it. Why? Because they don't want to tell everybody that you have these resources, but you do. And so hopefully, you know, these are some resources that you could totally use. And you know, if you need any help with anything, please give me a call, reach out, and I can help you, you know, navigate those resources. I mean, even in Alameda County, you know, again, I had clients that actually applied and they got it for up to $150,000 of free money to put towards their down payment.
Nice.
You know, and they qualified for that. And actually it was a pretty competitive program. A lot of these programs take a little bit longer as far as their timing is concerned. But hey, look, if you could take the time to do it, it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of patience, but these are some things that you can make home ownership a possibility and start that wealth creation in your family. So it's not a hopeless thing. There is hope. So
Great. Thank you so much. Everybody will be sent this information, and if it's okay, I'll send out your contact information as well. And I want to say again, wow, be clever and outthink. I think this is really key, because a lot of our families that a lot of us are service providers, a lot of families that we're dealing with don't know this information. They don't know that there's potential. And a lot of times their situation is, I'm looking for a place and to live. And until I get my place to live, my process of getting my kids back, it can get delayed. So I think thinking outside the box and thinking a lot about policies. And again, we know that things don't change until they become written in policy. Doesn't mean we don't. Thank you, Verna, for being on here as well. It doesn't mean that we can't do it. So let's really think about how we empower the disenfranchised, as Rocio said earlier.
Boy, I wish I had both of you, Tamika and Mr. Williams, around when I was young and buying a house, because those are absolutely awesome resources. You learn through trial and error, right? So let's help our peers, our community, not make the error and connect them directly to the resources. This was incredible. I feel like I learned a lot. I'm inspired by your activism and your energy as well. And I hope to see all of you guys at the next session, as there's still much more to learn about what impacts our communities, especially those that are disenfranchised. So thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening.